Some people are born into families who will move mountains for them. Parents who sacrifice quietly, work tirelessly, and pour everything they have into giving their kids a better life. Most of them take this for granted at some point, until they grow up and have that moment of reflection where they realize just how lucky they were. But these 4 kids never had that moment. They never looked back. Instead, they looked at their parents' bank accounts, insurance policies, inheritance funds, and decided that the people funding their entire existence were worth more dead than alive. A quick note before we get started: the cases in this video involve real violent crimes, and some details are graphic. If that feels too heavy right now, take care of yourself first and catch me in the next video. For everyone staying, let's get into the terrifying case of 4 rich and entitled kids who had everything handed to them and still decided it was not enough. What they did next is the reason they will never see the outside of a prison cell again. Our first story begins inside what should have been a perfectly ordinary Thanksgiving holiday in Knoxville, Tennessee. But instead, it became a scene investigators would later describe as straight out of a horror film. Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy were what everyone around them would call genuinely good people. Joel Sr. was a 61-year-old pipeline engineering designer, and Lisa was a 55-year-old human resources administrator. They had been married for over 30 years, lived comfortably in the Hardin Valley neighborhood of Knoxville, and had spent the better part of a decade, quietly, generously pouring money into their son's life without asking very much in return. Their son, Joel Guy Jr., was 28 years old, living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, attending Louisiana State University. He had been telling his parents for 9 years that he was studying to become a bilingual plastic surgeon. He had been lying for 9 years. The truth is, he rarely attended classes and had made essentially no progress toward any degree. He also never held a single job and had never once in his adult life paid his own bills. Every month without fail, his parents would deposit money directly into his account to cover his rent, groceries, and tuition, funding what prosecutors at his trial would later describe as a perpetual, responsibility-free adolescence. However, in the autumn of 2016, that changed when Joel Sr. and Lisa were ready to retire. They had a plan to sell the Knoxville house, buy an RV, and travel the country. And to do any of that, they decided that the monthly payments to Joel Jr. had to stop, and they planned to tell him just that over the Thanksgiving holiday. Unfortunately for them, Joel Jr. found out before they told him. How? I have no idea, but he did. And instead of planning for an alternative to sustain his current lifestyle, like, I don't know, get a job, he started planning for something sinister. Sometime in the weeks before that Thanksgiving visit, Joel Jr. sat down and opened a notebook, then began to draft out his master plan. He mapped out the financial calculations of how much they will be worth dead. He wrote in his own handwriting, $500,000 would be all mine. He had looked up their life insurance policies and worked out the arithmetic carefully. He noted that if his mother died first, the insurance payout would go to his father, meaning both of them had to go simultaneously to secure the full amount. So he planned for both of them. And that is not all he wrote in a precious little book that the Knox County prosecutors would later call the Book of Premeditation at his 2020 trial. And when you hear what was inside it, you understand why. It contained a well-detailed shopping list. Highlight the type of carving knives to buy, along with heavy-duty plastic storage bins, muriatic acid, food-grade hydrogen peroxide, lye, and another entry simply read, "Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat." He was not planning a cookout. In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, Joel Jr. systematically purchased every item on those lists across Louisiana and Tennessee, paying cash at hardware stores and using self-checkout wherever possible to minimize his appearance on surveillance cameras. He also packed a meat grinder and a food blender into the car when he drove from Baton Rouge to Knoxville. He had thought through every stage of what he was about to do, like the little psycho he was. He packed his murder kit, drove home, and then sat down at the Thanksgiving dinner table with his parents and his half-sisters, playing the role of the attentive, grateful son who was having a perfectly lovely time. But just 2 days after his arrival, on Saturday, November 26th, he decided to stop playing pretend and get started on his plan. So when the half-siblings are gone, and his mother Lisa left to do grocery shopping at a nearby Walmart, Joel Jr. moved upstairs, where he found his 61-year-old father alone in the home gym on the upper floor and brutally attacked him with a knife. The Knox County medical examiner testified at trial that Joel Sr. was stabbed at least 42 times. The injuries were so catastrophic that his ribs were scraped and, in some cases, cut clean through. A piece of the knife blade was found embedded in his shoulder, and his hands were severed at the wrists. During the struggle, Joel Jr. sustained deep defensive lacerations to his own hands, but he eventually overpowered and killed his father. When Lisa returned from Walmart and walked through the front door, dropping her grocery bags in the foyer, she never made it past the entrance hall. She was attacked the moment she stepped inside. Lisa Guy was stabbed 31 times, 9 of her ribs were severed. What came next is where this case crosses into something genuinely difficult to sit with. Joel Jr. did not panic, and he did not flee. He transitioned, as methodically as he had planned everything else, into the destruction of evidence. He dragged his parents' bodies into the bathrooms and began dismembering them, placing their remains into the large plastic storage bins he had purchased specifically for this moment. He then poured in the muriatic acid, the lye, and the hydrogen peroxide, creating what the prosecution at his 2020 trial would describe in court as a diabolical stew, a highly corrosive chemical bath designed to dissolve human tissue and leave nothing identifiable behind. Lisa Guy's severed head was removed from her body, placed into a pot on the kitchen stove, and heated. He had the meat grinder and the blender standing by. He had a plan for everything. What stopped him from completing the disposal was the deep wounds on his own hands. The cuts from the attack on his father were severe enough that he could not continue. So he packed his bags, took his parents' wallets, and drove back to Baton Rouge, as if the weekend had gone entirely as planned. On Sunday, the next day, he walked into the LSU Student Health Clinic and calmly told the staff he had accidentally cut his hands. He was treated and left without raising any concern. He went home, used his dead mother's credit card to pay his internet service bill, attempted to transfer funds from his parents' bank accounts into his own, and searched online for how to hide his IP address and how life insurance pays out when someone disappears rather than being found dead. He was tying up loose ends. The plan unraveled on Monday morning when Lisa Guy failed to show up for work, which was genuinely out of character for her. Her supervisor, Jennifer Whited, grew concerned and contacted Knox County law enforcement to request a welfare check. Officers from the Knox County Sheriff's Office arrived at Golden View Lane and, looking through the front window, could see Lisa's grocery bags still sitting on the foyer floor exactly where she had dropped them on Saturday afternoon. They breached the door. The 90-degree heat inside the sealed house hit them the moment they entered, followed immediately by the smell of chemicals. What they found inside required a moment to process even for seasoned investigators. The house was quickly surrounded with investigators combing through to find every piece of evidence of who could have committed such monstrosity. They didn't need to look that far, because sitting in the guest bedroom is a backpack belonging to Joel Jr. And inside the backpack they found his notebook, the one where he detailed his whole master plan. Joel Michael Guy Jr. was arrested the following day outside his apartment complex in Baton Rouge while he was walking toward his car. He was brought in for interrogation and responded with complete, dead-eyed silence. What a psychopath. Also, he said nothing, only pleaded not guilty. At his trial in Knox County Criminal Court in September and October 2020, the prosecution laid out his notebook, the security footage of him purchasing supplies at hardware stores across 2 states, his mother's credit card transactions made after her death, and the forensic evidence from inside their house. Joel Jr. sat at the defense table throughout with a completely blank expression, watching graphic crime scene photographs without shedding a single tear. In one of the stranger moments of the proceedings, he even filed a legal motion requesting to represent himself, apparently so he could then ask Knox County Criminal Court Judge Steve Sword to sentence him to death and bar his own attorneys from presenting any mitigating evidence on his behalf. Thankfully, Judge Sword denied the motion without hesitation. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 hours before returning a unanimous guilty verdict on all 7 counts: 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, 3 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. During sentencing, Judge Steve Sword noted that while Joel Jr. may have believed himself to be highly intelligent, the sheer volume of evidence he had left behind made clear that he was not as clever as he thought he was. Yeah, he was a nutcase. The judge handed down 2 consecutive life sentences, which didn't go well with his defense team, and they later appealed, arguing that investigators lacked a warrant for the initial welfare check. But in 2023, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals rejected that argument and affirmed the conviction in full. Joel Michael Guy Jr. is currently serving his consecutive life sentences at the Northwest Correctional Complex in Tiptonville, Tennessee. He wanted a life completely provided for by someone else, with no responsibility and no work required. He, unfortunately for everyone, got exactly that. He will spend the remainder of his natural life in a maximum security concrete cell, permanently housed and permanently fed by the state of Tennessee, but he will never ever walk free again. Yeah, good riddance. While Joel Guy Jr. needed $500,000 to murder both his parents, this guy needed just $3,000. And when you hear everything that led to it, that number almost makes it worse. Alan Hruby was 19 years old and, by his own admission, completely addicted to spending money. Not earning it, but spending it, and not even his own, specifically other people's money. He was a political science student at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, and he had reportedly burned through $20,000 in his very first month at university, money he did not have. To keep going, he stole his elderly grandmother's credit card and ran up thousands more in fraudulent charges. When his parents discovered the theft, they did not quietly absorb it. They reported him to the police, where he was charged with felony credit card fraud and placed on a delayed sentencing program, which meant a pending felony conviction was sitting directly over his head like a loaded weapon. Any violation of his terms, and he was going straight to prison. On top of all of that, his parents had cut off his finances entirely, having had enough of his uncontrollable spending habit. For most people, that would have been a wake-up call. For Alan, it was the trigger that unleashed something beyond evil, and it cost his entire family their lives. The Hruby family was well regarded in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small city about 60 miles north of Dallas. Alan's father, John Hruby, was 50 years old, and the publisher of the Marlow Review, a local newspaper, and had also co-owned the Comanche County Chronicle. His mother, Joy, known to absolutely everyone in Duncan simply as Tinker, was 48 and deeply loved in the community. His younger sister, Catherine, was 17 years old and still in high school. By any reasonable measure, Alan Hruby had a stable home, a supportive family, and every opportunity in front of him. But Alan has other serious problems aside from the sentencing program over his head. He had secretly borrowed $3,000 from a loan shark in Norman to fund a trip to Europe, and that debt was now coming due. He had no income, no job, and parents who were done giving him money. Now, rather than find a solution, any solution at all, Alan Hruby decided that eliminating his entire family and collecting the inheritance was the most straightforward path. I seriously don't get how these kids' brain work at all. On the afternoon of Friday, October 10, 2014, Alan was determined to put his diabolical plan to motion. He drove from his dorm in Norman back to Duncan. He stopped at his father's office first, and when no one was looking, stole a 9mm pistol from John Hruby's pickup truck parked outside, the weapon he planned to use that afternoon. Then he drove to the family home in the Timber Creek subdivision on the north side of Duncan, and he waited. His mother, Tinker, was the first to arrive home. Alan walked up to her in the kitchen and shot her twice in the head. This was the woman who had raised him, fought for him, and gone to the police on his behalf, in the hope that the legal system would force him to change. He killed her just like that, and then sat in the house with her body and waited for his 17-year-old sister Catherine to walk home from school. When she came through the front door, he shot her too. And then he waited another full hour for his father to arrive home from the newspaper office. When John Hruby walked through his own door that Friday evening, Alan shot him twice in the head as well. He murdered 3 people in less than 3 hours. In an attempt to cover his track and create some sort of alibi for himself, Alan took the recording disc from the home security system and later disposed of it in a nearby lake, along with the murder weapon and a pair of blue gloves. And then he drove to Dallas, Texas. He checked into the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. He attended parties around the University of Oklahoma and even posted photographs of himself on social media, drinking champagne and relaxing in luxury, while his mother, his father, and his 17-year-old sister lay dead in the family home in Duncan. While he was at that hotel, he used his phone to search for information about how to inherit a trust fund. The family's housekeeper arrived at the Timber Creek home on Monday morning, October 13th, and found the horrifying scene. She quickly called 911.
I need somebody at 1217 Bin Street.
1217?
I think they've been murdered. Yes, the Hruby's. Hruby.
What's the address, ma'am?
1217.
1217 what?
Bin Street.
What's going on?
I don't know. I just got here. I work for Mrs. Hruby, and all three of them are laying down on the floor in the kitchen.
Ma'am, you're going to have to calm down. There's what?
There's Mr. and Mrs. Hruby and Catherine Hruby laying on the floor. I think they're dead.
They're not breathing? There's 3 subjects?
Yes, they're ice cold.
Have you checked to make sure they're breathing?
Yes, ma'am.
And they're not?
No, they're not.
You said 12. Ma'am, listen to me. Calm down, okay? 1217 Bent Tree?
Yes.
And it's a family?
Yes.
Police arrived at the scene and investigations commenced immediately. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation brought Allen in for questioning 2 days later, on October 15th. He initially broke down completely in front of detectives, sobbing and expressing what looked like devastation, thinking he was really nailing the act, but then he failed a polygraph test. This is when he knew that the gig was up. In a sickening twist of mood, he stopped crying and then proceeded to give the investigators a full, calm, step-by-step account of exactly what he had done and exactly why he had done it. He told them he killed them because he needed the money. He was quickly arrested and sent to jail. While he was awaiting trial, Allen wrote a letter to the Oklahoma newspaper in which he stated that he 100% welcomed the death penalty for what he had done, that what he had committed was so horrible and so unspeakable that execution was deserved. His reason for doing this is unknown. However, when the time actually came, he accepted a plea deal. Stevens County District Attorney Jason Hicks made clear he personally believed Allen deserved to be executed, but the extended Hruby family had asked the prosecution to spare him the death penalty. Not out of any mercy toward Allen, but because they could not endure the years of trial proceedings and appeals that a capital case would bring. Hicks honored that request. On March 10, 2016, before Judge Ken Graham in Stevens County District Court in Duncan, Allen Hruby pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He also waived his right to any future appeals as part of the agreement. Allen Hruby is currently incarcerated at the R.B. Dick Connor Correctional Center in Hominy, Oklahoma. He has no contact with any of his surviving family members. I mean, who in their right mind would want to talk to him again after that evil act? The knowledge that the lives of John, Tinker, and 17-year-old Catherine Hruby was only worth $3,000 to Allen is truly devastating. While Allen Hruby committed those atrocious acts himself, our next case was planned across 7 months, involved a hired gunman, a homemade silencer, and an airtight alibi arranged weeks in advance, and the man who orchestrated the whole thing never once got his own hands dirty. To understand Dana Ewell, you need to understand not just who he was, but who he had decided he was going to be. Dana was 21 years old at the time and studying finance at Santa Clara University in the San Francisco Bay Area. And if you encountered him on campus, he would have told you about his investment strategies, his business interests, and the empire he was building. He wore tailored suits to class. He carried a briefcase. He spoke to classmates about deals he was working and opportunities he was pursuing. He modeled his entire persona on the leader of a 1980s Los Angeles investment collective called the Billionaire Boys Club, a group of wealthy young men led by a man named Joe Hunt, who, consumed by ego and greed, eventually turned to violence. Dana idolized Hunt. He dressed like him, carried himself like him, and believed completely that he was a financial genius temporarily inconvenienced by the formality of university before his real life could begin. However, none of the business dealings were real. Not a single cent of the money he spent was his own. His father, Dale Ewell, was a genuinely self-made multimillionaire who had built his fortune through his aircraft dealership, Western Piper Sales Inc., in Fresno, California. His mother, Glee, was a community philanthropist and a former CIA Spanish translator. His sister, Tiffany, was 24 and studying at Fresno State University. The family's total net worth was estimated at just under $8 million, and Dana knew exactly what every dollar of it was worth. Dale, however, was beginning to lose patience with his son's performance. He was a practical man who had built everything he owned through actual work, and he had been watching Dana's act with growing frustration. He began discussing changing the terms of Dana's inheritance, potentially delaying the full distribution until Dana reached the age of 35. 14 years later. For a young man who had never once waited for anything, 14 years was not a financial inconvenience. It was an insult that Dana had absolutely no intention of accepting. He decided he was not going to wait for his parents to die naturally. He would arrange their deaths himself, and because Tiffany would otherwise share the inheritance equally with him, she had to go as well. He was not going to split $8 million with anyone. Being the smartass he genuinely thought he was, Dana recruited his college friend Joel Radovich. Radovich was obsessed with weapons and tactical planning, a social outcast who became completely devoted to Dana in exchange for the promise of a share of the inheritance once it was collected. Together, they spent 7 months planning what Fresno County investigators would later describe as a triple assassination. Radovich's preparation was meticulous to the point of obsession. In the days immediately before the murders, he reportedly shaved his entire body, every inch of it, to ensure he left absolutely no DNA at the scene. He constructed a homemade silencer using a length of PVC pipe packed tightly with halved tennis balls and steel wool to muffle the sound of the gunshots. The murder weapon was a Feather AT semi-automatic 9mm carbine, sourced through a friend of the Radovich Ragapline named Ernest Jack Ponce. They scheduled Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, as the day to execute their plan. That day, the Ewell family will be returning home from their Easter weekend at their vacation property in Pajaro Dunes on the California coast. Dana, meanwhile, had ensured he was hours away, having dinner in Morgan Hill with his girlfriend and her family. His girlfriend's father, John Zent, was an active FBI agent. Dana's alibi was, quite literally, an FBI agent. While Dana sat at that dinner table playing the polite, devoted university student, Radovich had let himself into the Ewell family home in the Sunnyside area of Fresno, using a key Dana had provided, bypassed the security system, and waited. Unfortunately, Glee and Tiffany arrived home first. Radovich emerged and shot them both. He then waited a further 30 minutes in the silent house until Dale Ewell walked through the door from the garage. Dale was shot in the back, the last of the three, the final item on Dana's list. Before leaving, Radovich collected every single shell casing from the floor. The scene was almost surgically clean, but luckily forensic analysts were able to find microscopic fragments of yellow felt, which are fibers from the tennis ball silencer, on Glee Ewell's clothing. That trace evidence alone took investigators years to identify and trace back to the weapon. Just as planned, Dana returned home, reportedly discovered the bodies, and delivered the performance of his life. He sobbed at the funeral so visibly that he reportedly had to be physically supported by people around him. He gave devastated public interviews, begging for information on whoever had committed this terrible act. However, within weeks of the murders, Radovich had moved into the Ewell family home, and the two of them were spending freely on helicopter flying lessons, equipment, and lifestyle expenses, all funded by an estate that was not yet legally theirs to touch. Dana had also quietly taken control of his elderly grandmother's $400,000 trust fund following the murders, having been named as executor. By the time investigators examined that account, it had been drained to approximately $2,000, barely enough to cover 1 month of his grandmother's nursing home care. Fresno County Sheriff's homicide detectives John Souza and Chris Curtis spent nearly 3 years building the case. Dana was openly dismissive of their capabilities, privately referring to them as Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street when speaking to friends. What he did not know was that while he was making those jokes, investigators were conducting long-term surveillance that would ultimately close the net around him. Dana had been using a specific numeric pager code system to communicate with Radovich, sending codes that confirmed when the family had left the coastal property and were on schedule to arrive home. And in May 1993, during active surveillance, a detective wearing a recording device stood near Radovich at a payphone and overheard him tell Dana, "They don't have evidence." That conversation was captured on tape. The break in the case came when Ernest Jack Ponce, the man who had purchased the Feather AT rifle for Radovich, was offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying for the state. Ponce confirmed the entirety of the plot and provided detailed information about the construction of the silencer. Dana Ewell and Joel Radovich were eventually arrested in March 1995, nearly 3 years after the Easter Sunday murders. Their trial in Fresno County Superior Court lasted over 8 months. When the jury delivered its verdict, they were deadlocked 11-1 in favor of the death penalty for Dana. One single juror refused to vote for execution, and because a capital verdict must be unanimous, the judge was legally required to impose the alternative. In May 1998, Dana Ewell was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Joel Radovich received the same sentence. Dana Ewell is currently 55 years old and incarcerated at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. He has exhausted every available avenue of legal appeal. The man who modeled his entire identity on a killer and became one is spending his days in a cell, surrounded entirely by the life he chose for himself. The first 3 stories in this video are about family, parents and children, money and betrayal. But this one is a bit different, and in some ways it is colder than all of them. Because Liam McAtasney did not end the life of someone who owed him anything in any form. He killed someone who loved him. He was 19 years old, living in Neptune City, a quiet coastal town in Monmouth County, New Jersey. He was not from wealth. He did not have access to the kind of money the other kids in this video grew up around. But he wanted it with an intensity that the people around him could feel. But his major problem was that he had absolutely no intention of working for it. He believed he was owed a different kind of life. He just needed to find the fastest way there. That route turned out to run directly through the person who trusted him most, and that person was Sarah Stern, his 19-year-old best friend. Sarah and Liam had known each other since middle school. They had grown up in the same circles, navigated the same years together, and by the time they were both 19, they were fixtures in each other's lives. Sarah was bright, creative, and passionate about art and digital media. She had a real plan for her future. She wanted to move to Toronto, build something around her creative work, and start fresh somewhere new. And something had recently happened that made that dream feel suddenly possible. While going through her late mother's belongings, her mother had passed away from cancer in 2013, Sarah found a shoebox hidden inside a safe. Inside the shoebox was an old vintage currency. A secret inheritance her mother had quietly set aside for years. It totaled approximately $10,000. Not life-changing money, but enough to move, enough to start. Sarah was excited. And she did what you do when something unexpectedly good happens, and you are 19 years old, she told her best friend. Liam looked at that shoebox and began planning how to take it, and the only logical way to do this in his very demented brain is to kill Sarah. And for 6 good months, he methodically worked through the logistics of how he was going to do it. He was not impulsive about it. He calculated, he planned, and when he was ready, he recruited help. He went to another equally demented person, Preston Taylor, a mutual friend of theirs who had been Sarah's junior prom date, and offered him a cut of the money in exchange for helping him dispose of Sarah's body and staging the scene to look like a self-exit. For a few $1,000s, Preston Taylor agreed to help murder his old friend. On the afternoon of December 2nd, 2016, Liam arrived at Sarah's house in Neptune City the same way he had done hundreds of times before. He walked through the front door, smiled, and waited for her to turn her back. When she did, he grabbed her, lifted her completely off the ground, and strangled her with his bare hands. And then, in a detail that has genuinely haunted every investigator and journalist who has worked on this case, he took out his phone, opened the stopwatch application, and pressed start. He timed his best friend's death. He stood over Sarah Stern for 30 minutes, watching the clock, until her heart finally stopped. After that, he left her body and went to work his normal evening shift at a local restaurant. Later that night, he and Preston returned to the house. They placed Sarah into the passenger seat of her own car, a 1994 Oldsmobile she had borrowed from her grandmother. and drove a 2-car convoy north to the Route 35 bridge over the Shark River in Belmar, New Jersey, where they carried her to the railing and threw her body into the water below. They left the car on the bridge with the keys in the ignition to make it appear that she had gone there voluntarily and jumped. The abandoned car was eventually discovered in the early hours and triggered a massive search across the Jersey Shore. Liam played the role of the devastated best friend without missing a single beat. He organized search parties. He gave emotional media interviews, expressing shock and grief to anyone who would listen. When detectives questioned him, he pointed them in a completely different direction, telling investigators that Sarah had been severely depressed and had spoken about running away to Canada. He performed perfectly.
In the past, she has had a tendency to have self-destructive suicidal behavior. I actually know that.
How long ago?
Years ago, a few months, she's been telling me, how bad her relationship with her father is, and how she just needs to get out.
What he could not control was his own arrogance. Months before the murder, Liam had shared an idea with a friend named Anthony Curry, an amateur filmmaker, about a movie concept involving unaliving a girl for money. When Anthony saw the news coverage of Sarah's disappearance, he went directly to the police with his suspicions. And luckily they decided to investigate it, but not without Anthony's help. They equipped Anthony's car with hidden recording equipment and sent him to meet with Liam. On January 31st, 2017, Liam climbed into Anthony's passenger seat, believing he was bragging freely to a friend who would keep his secret. What he delivered instead was a full, detailed, remorseless confession, spoken with the casual ease of someone describing a task that had not gone quite as smoothly as hoped. He spoke about the money first. He complained that the vintage bills in the shoebox were damaged, burnt looking, he said, and he was not confident that the bank would even accept them. He told Anthony that he had expected to walk out with $50,000 to $100,000, and instead found only $10,000, much of it in poor condition. He then mentioned that Sarah's dog had been present in the room the entire time and had not reacted at all. He said, "Her dog laid there and watched as I killed her. It didn't do anything." He expressed no remorse for what he had done to Sarah. His only emotion throughout was irritation. Irritation that the money had not been worth what he expected.
Yep, real quick. Alright?
You're good.
No disrespect.
I'll show you.
No disrespect, okay?
Nothing.
Yeah, I got the FBI on my ass, dude.
What are they questioning?
Oh yeah, a lot.
About what?
About killing Sarah.
So you've been laying low, I guess.
Oh yeah. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part of it is, I thought I was walking out 50 grand, 100 grand in my pocket.
Yeah.
She had one safe, and she took money out, and she only had 10 grand. And this money, I don't know if it was burnt or something. It's fucking old money, terrible quality. I don't even know if I can put any of it in the fucking bank. Yeah. Spent a lot of money. And I don't even get a quarter of it.
So you only...
I had planned Sarah's situation for me to be interrogated by cops. Like, that was the whole part of my plan, to make me look not guilty.
What did you end up going on? But...
You didn't hear about it? It was all over the news.
Right, but I didn't know if you, went through.
Yeah. And the worst part is, we threw her off the bridge, and the body never showed up.
It's probably frozen.
It's probably all the way out in the ocean. Dude. Alright, so I'm hanging out with her. She has... We went to the bank. She took some money out. Not all of her money. We're counting it out, and then she goes to walk out the front door. I choke her out, drag her. My biggest problem was the dog, and her dog laid there and watched as I killed her. Didn't do anything. I pretty much hung her, like, I picked her up and had her just, like, dangling off the ground, and she just pissed herself, and
because you lose control of your
said
bowels.
my name, and then that was it. And it took me a half an hour to kill her. I thought I was going to be able to choke her out and have her out in, like, couple minutes. I guess I don't feel any different, and I don't think about it.
With this confession, police had enough evidence and immediately arrested Liam and Preston. Preston cooperated immediately, even led the investigators to 2 buried safes containing the stolen cash, and agreed to testify fully against Liam in exchange for consideration at sentencing. At the trial in February 2019, before Judge Richard English in Monmouth County Superior Court in Freehold, New Jersey, the jury watched the hidden camera footage in complete silence. Liam's defense attorney tried one final pivot, arguing that the video was not a real confession at all, but simply Liam improvising a fictional story to impress a filmmaker friend, essentially auditioning for a character. The jury rejected that argument entirely. On February 26, 2019, Liam McAtasney was convicted on all 7 counts: first-degree murder, felony murder, first-degree robbery, conspiracy to desecrate human remains, desecration of human remains, tampering with physical evidence, and hindering apprehension. Judge Richard English sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years. At the sentencing, the judge noted that Liam's only genuine disappointment in the entire sequence of events was the quality of the cash and nothing else. Preston Taylor received 18 years for his role in Sarah's murder. The New Jersey Appellate Division upheld the conviction on appeal in 2023. Sarah Stern's remains have never been recovered till today. There is no grave. Her father, Michael, who sat through every single day of that trial, told the court that his spirit will forever be broken by this wicked act, and also for the fact that there won't be a grave for his precious daughter. Liam wanted a fast track to wealth. He traded the life of the person who trusted him most in the world for a shoebox of damaged vintage bills that the bank might not even accept. He is currently serving his sentence in the New Jersey State Correctional System, and he will spend every day of his natural life there, guaranteed to die exactly where he is.